Serious question here. Are younger generations more prone to mental health issues in the workplace than our predecessors? In this video, I'll explore the alarming trend of rising mental health concerns amongst millennials and Gen Z in the workplace, as well as a quick fix for leaders. From anxiety and depression to trauma and burnout, we'll dive into the reasons behind this phenomenon and what it means for the future of work. Is it the pressure to constantly perform? Is it FOMO, the fear of missing out? Is it the lack of work-life balance? Or, as I like to say, work-life integration? What's driving this issue? Stick around for the end where I will reveal an easy tactic for leaders to employ to help the younger generations reduce the number of mental health days that they need to take. So I was doing some research, and according to an employee wellness survey by Vitality.com, younger employees are struggling to adapt in the workplace. Employees under the age of 35 lose 48% more productivity due to absenteeism than their older colleagues. They are more likely to suffer from depression, report significant financial concerns, and be dissatisfied with their jobs. Older generations, before we roll our eyes at this statistic, there are some concrete obstacles here that millennials and Gen Z are facing that amplify the mental health issues at work. Quarter life crisis, anyone? I think in order for older generations to stop dismissing this phenomenon, I want to acknowledge that you too, of course, experience or have experienced mental health issues at work. I don't want to throw that under the rug, but you were taught to suffer in silence. So it's kind of ingrained in you to keep pressing through, even though you might have anxiety alarm bells going off and other depressive symptoms. If mental health was a taboo topic and your coming of age time in the workplace. Today, mental health is more of an open dialogue and a conversation where people can freely share without the shame of not being okay. In addition, there are other key factors that cannot be denied that younger generations are affected by. First, let's address the elephant in the room. The economy! Groceries are so high that we're making different life decisions on whether to buy a loaf of bread or not. God forbid that we want to buy the good bread, the extra multi-grain stuff with the nooks and the crannies, the zero carb, whatever it is. That will put us out of house and home. No, things are not what they used to be 20, 30 years ago, and everyone is feeling it. But the youngins are feeling it a little bit more deeply. Can you imagine having to spend $6 for a dozen of eggs when you're at the beginning of your career? With the cost of higher education, sidebar, I just watched a documentary a couple of days ago where it was highlighted that since 1980, the cost of education has increased by 250%, while wages have increased only 16%. You do the math. Stagnant wages and now an oversaturation of degree professionals that are in the marketplace. Prospects for financial freedom feel really dim. And then there's burnout. Yep, I know it's another social media buzzword that's in every blog, feed, and hashtag, but it's true that younger generations are more burned out than our older predecessors. Increasingly since the early 1980s, children have had less and less structured time, which is basically time to just be and play without notifications or without being on a time schedule. We live in a hustle culture where now the reward and the resources are shrinking by the hour. This is driven by the fact that jobs are not as secure as they once were, and career paths are just not as straight. What was once one role with a singular focus is now combined roles with many focuses. We're taught to have a plan B, C, D, F, M, and Z. When beforehand you had one job and you worked it until you retired, or there was very few job changes because there wasn't this pressure or this need in such a way to make more money or to out earn the economy or to just have and obtain stuff. Now there's an expectation to always be on and respond immediately. This kind of predicament has also led to lower trust levels in our leadership, in our government, in our economy, in corporations, etc. Every day there's a new scandal released about some company, person, or corporation, some leader, CEO being caught doing something trifling. And with the internet, we're able to see and be bombarded with this information by the minute. It's not that this didn't happen beforehand, but with the internet, of course, we have more access to it. This causes a lot of emotional burnout and on some days, hopelessness. Another factor, and a more silent one, is the lack of community and support. I talk about this all the time when we are less communal as a culture than we were in the past. This has led to Gen Z being considered the lonely generation. There's less face to face contact, and there's less activities or things to do that don't involve a device. Most of what we do and communicate and how we work and how we live and travel involves a device. Therefore, we have less of a physical requirement to lean on other people. But what that's done is it starved our emotional and our mental needs. We need other people. Although our generation is celebrated for being hyper independent, at our core as human beings, we still need connection. Or what Stephen Covey said in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, what we should be striving for is interdependence. I mean, silos are even celebrated at work. There are people that brag about not coming out of their cube or not coming out of their box or not coming out of their house. I mean, back in the day, even introverts were outside. And then, of course, social media. You don't have to like it, but it is what it is. Social media is another major factor that is causing mental health issues for our younger generations, for our millennials and our Gen Zers. When you're constantly bombarded with images about being perfect, about being successful, it's easy to feel like you're missing the mark and that you're not good enough. It's constantly the dangling carrot before you that you can never catch up to, or grab, or experience. That amplifies FOMO on a level that is out of this world and out of our brains and makes us out of our minds and embeds itself in our subconscious. It's easy to feel like you're constantly on edge and on the verge of messing up your life just with the existence of social media. And then all of the notifications that is, look at me, look over here, buy this thing, do this. Constant, 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 constant. It's a huge factor. I want to be vulnerable for a second and share my example of experiencing mental health issues at work or having these kinds of concerns. There was a point in my career where I worked as a marketing manager for a small nonprofit firm. The position was newly created and it came with a lot of expectations as well as a lot of unknowns. And that is not a good gap or equation for anybody to walk into, for that person in the role, but also for the company. With that gap came people assigning me things out of nowhere and from everywhere. Systems and processes that weren't really up to par, that had lots of holes in them. And then you have on top of that, being a marketer where it is literally your job to innovate and come up with new ideas, but also be responsible for managing other people's projects. Oh, and then there's checking on them to make sure that they did their part in it so that I could do my job. And on top of that, that's responding to every single message, email, ding, text message constantly that was coming my way, and the expectation to respond instantly to those things. I started to feel the pressure of not making a mistake, or you know how it is when you're working on a project, you need zone time where you're just able to work through without distractions. But if you're constantly getting requests from 3 or 4 different sources, and then you have to respond, or the expectation, silent expectation, to respond immediately, you start to feel a lot of pressure. And then I felt like I was in a fishbowl and that I couldn't make a mistake. Because there were times where if I didn't respond immediately, then I would hear about it later. It's like, well, I'm managing these projects, I'm innovating these things, I'm coming up with new ideas. I need mental capacity to do that. And I should be able to respond within a certain time frame. This fishbowl predicament made me feel like it wasn't comfortable to raise my hand and say, hey, I'm overwhelmed. Let's overwork some things. because I was constantly told, well, you're the marketing manager. Well, you're the marketing manager. And when you set someone up like that, there's no room for error because they're saying it in a way of, you should have this all figured out. I'm a human being. I'm coming into a new company. We still got to put our puzzle piece together. After a while, I did make some mistakes because I'm human and there was so much expectation and also so much inefficiency. It happens. But then it was rolled into a narrative that I just couldn't get from under. I was starting to have full on anxiety attacks with every email, with every ding, with every notification that I was receiving because I had no clue what was behind that. Because again, the expectations were a certain way that didn't necessarily fit the reality of what was going on. And remember, you're the marketing manager, as I was constantly being told. On my days off, I couldn't really rest because I was constantly strategizing how I was going to not make mistakes the next week when I went to work, or how I can strategize work in the day so that I didn't disappoint someone and then it will contribute even further to the narrative.
My story is just one example of what many young workers are struggling with in regards to mental health at work. It's clear that this is a complex problem that requires a multifaceted solution. The best approach that leaders can take to increase productivity and reduce absenteeism is something that I call empathetic conversations. This means that you have to create opportunities, activities, conversations, and situations that naturally invoke people to be vulnerable or to share their perspectives. Dear leader, this starts with you. That means you're going to have to be vulnerable about some things in order to encourage other people to do the same thing. Vulnerability can be positively contagious. And young leaders can smell from a mile away when their leader is not being authentic. And all it does is drive this huge wedge of distrust between you that's almost impossible to get back. Your vulnerability is what allows younger generations to actually be able to relate to you, and it shows them that you actually understand what they're going through so that you don't seem like someone giving orders or giving direction without any context of what it's like to be in their situation. So that means focusing the conversation on what you understand as opposed to back in my day. Ugh, no more of those conversations. Take that out of your vocabulary if you want to create a workforce that works together and not one that will implode on itself. If you're struggling with mental health issues at work, please know that you are not alone, and feel free to share your experiences in the comment section so that the larger community can understand and know and see that, hey, there's other people that have gone through situations like this. Don't forget to like the video, share the video with other people who you know can relate to it or need to see that they aren't alone, and then subscribe to my channel, and I'll catch you in the next video.